Joe Biden is an asshole. I'm not really sure which half of that compound word I'm supposed to bleep, but you get the idea, I'm sure. That was the title of a Charles C.W. Cook article at National Review last year that laid out why President Biden isn't the good old Uncle Joe he claims to be. If you're not reading Charlie Cook, you absolutely should. He's a great conservative writer. I would argue that he and Trump are more alike than different. I've said that for a long time. We could do a whole episode about it. That's not what this episode is going to be about. But his pardon of his wayward son Hunter over the holiday weekend, which I think we all saw coming, right? That solidifies it. This guy claimed he was going to be the return to normalcy and a defender of our institution, but he's been showing us all along that he was neither of those things. This just makes it really hard for the media to pretend otherwise. So let's talk about why this pardon is a perfect example of what is wrong with our politics. Welcome to The Homeless Conservative, a show about principled politics for exhausted citizens. I'm your host, Blake Fisher, and I'm a political junkie so that you don't necessarily have to be. Thank you for spending some of your valuable time with me today. Little quick housekeeping thing. I think I'm going to start releasing these episodes on Thursdays because I've done a lot of research. I've done a lot of thinking about this. No, none of that's true at all. Actually, the reason I'm going to switch it to Thursdays is because the public part of our neighborhood, the lawn service for that, is on Tuesdays, which means there are lawnmowers and weed eaters and leaf blowers going every Tuesday for most of the day, it feels like. And that means I can't record because then you will hear the leaf blowers on this microphone. And no one wants to hear leaf blowers. Everyone hates leaf blowers. So it basically means I can't record on Tuesdays. It makes it hard to get out an episode on Wednesday. So I'm going to start recording on Wednesday and releasing on Thursday. It just makes it a little easier for me. Unless I get a huge blowback and angry letters. I mean, hopefully not real letters. I'm not going to put my address on the internet and do a political commentary. But, you know, Thursdays, I think it's going to be it. Like I said, send me your angry emails, blake@thehomelessconservative.com. If that does not work for you and you really want the content on Wednesdays, I will just somehow magically erase the leaf blowers with AI. We'll see if that works. Okay, let's get back to the topic at hand, though. Joe Biden. This tweet, I think, summed it up quite nicely. Biden's presidency started with him denying the existence of Hunter's laptop and is ending with Biden pardoning Hunter for all the things found on his laptop. It's by Kate Hyde, a blogger. In case you missed it, because you were still stuffing your face with pie and leftover turkey, which who could blame you? It's delicious. The leftovers are kind of one of the best parts of Thanksgiving. Underrated holiday. But let's catch you up on what happened over the weekend. Joe Biden, after he and his press secretary unequivocally stated that he would not be pardoning his son Hunter for the gun and tax crimes he was convicted of this year. By the way, these denials went on before the trials last spring, throughout the summer, because the gun trial was in June, which I don't know why Hunter went to trial for that. Pretty foolish. And even as recently as less than a month ago, either Joe Biden or his press secretary, like I said, unequivocally stated he would not be pardoning or commuting his sentence. That's what they said over and over and over again. However, over the weekend on Sunday night, they quietly released a statement, of course on a holiday weekend, saying he was pardoning Hunter and then promptly left the country so that he wouldn't have to take any questions from the press. This is why I would never, ever, ever take the job of being the press secretary for the White House, because all you do is lie to people constantly. And then when the president, does the thing that he said he wasn't going to do and then goes on vacation, you've got to go out there in front of the press corps and explain why and try to pretend you haven't been lying this whole time. I would never, ever take the job. Just wouldn't do it. It's got to be the worst job in politics. I cannot imagine a worse one. So this pardon, by the way, is not just for the gun and tax charges. We're going to cover some of that, but this covers any federal crimes committed between January 1st, 2014 and December 1st, 2024. There was a great Nick Cottagio in his Boiling Frogs newsletter at the Dispatch said in their Slack channel, they were joking that because this leaked earlier in the day and Sunday, that Hunter had like 7 hours to go knock off a bunch of 7-Elevens so that he wouldn't be able to be prosecuted for it. But, going forward, December 1st, 2024, Hunter Biden no longer has a get-out-of-jail-free card. But boy, does he have the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card from his dad, because he cannot be prosecuted for any crime, not just the ones that he has already had charges come against him. any crime that he committed between January 1st, 2014 and December 1st, 2024. So we could find out that, for example, he murdered someone in that time frame. And if it was a federal crime somehow, which there's not a lot of federal murders, but let's just pretend. Well, let's say he hired someone to murder or used a bioweapon to murder someone and the FBI had to get involved. The Department of Justice cannot bring charges. The federal government cannot bring charges. Now, a state could charge him or something, but that's pretty wild. The only other person in history of the United States that got such a sweeping pardon was Richard Nixon, which was, of course, I think totally different because that was about trying to get the country to move on from the scandal. Not sure that we needed to include all crimes in Richard Nixon's either. We probably could have just, but because there were no crimes that had shown up yet. He wasn't being charged with the crime. He was going to get impeached for that. And it was a sitting president and another president. This is a little bit different. Someone pardoning their son for not just the crimes that they were charged with and convicted of, but anything that happened over a 10-year period is an insane precedent to set. Here's a part of the statement that Joe Biden released. Today, I signed a pardon for my son, Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. Okay, let's start with a couple of those things. The point about the gun charge, I think, is actually pretty fair, and here is why. Joe Biden is right. I cannot find a news article. Keep in mind, I'm searching Google News, so it's not that has an exhaustive list of all DOJ prosecutions, but I cannot find an example of the federal government charging someone with the crime that Hunter was convicted of, which was lying on the background check form by checking a box that says you're not addicted to drugs. When in his own memoir that comes out a few years later, after he buys the gun, he admits he was addicted to crack and spending an enormous amount of money on it and basically was high all the time on crack when he purchased this gun, which is illegal to do. But like I said, no one is ever convicted of just that crime. This part of the statement is correct. That sometimes is added as an additional charge. For example, maybe someone knocks off a liquor store with that gun. And then we find out they purchased it illegally and they're a drug addict. And so they might stack a bunch of charges. And this might be one of the charges. And, really it gets plead down or something like that. But I cannot find a single example of someone being charged with just this crime. It was a crime, for example. The other one I found that was charged with this crime was in, I don't know if you all heard, last year there was a 6-year-old that took a gun to school and shot their teacher. And the mother was arrested and charged with several charges, one of which was she was a drug addict and she had lied on the federal form to purchase the gun in the first place. So that was the only example I could find of someone being charged with that crime. But like I said, she was charged with many other crimes to go along with it. It was an additional crime in part of the purchasing of the gun. I think she actually also wasn't allowed to have the gun for another reason. So like I said, this does not happen. And I do think that it's fair to point out that Hunter Biden was only charged with that because his name was Hunter Biden and that no one else would have been charged with that crime. I think that part's fair. However, I think we should rewind because there's a lot of woe is me and my son, that this is all political and that my poor son, because his last name is Biden, he's getting picked on. I think we should rewind a little bit and look at Hunter's timeline. And you tell me if you think that his last name brought him misfortune, or was it really solely responsible for all of his good fortune that led up to the bad fortune, okay? So let's go back to 2013. Hunter is kicked out of the Navy Reserves for failing a drug test. It was positive for cocaine. So he's in the Navy Reserves. He is kicked out because he fails a drug test, and they kind of quietly kick him out, and then they have to announce it. Because in 2013, keep in mind, his dad is the vice president of the United States, okay? In 2014, so this is just a few months after he is kicked out of the Navy Reserves for failing a drug test positive for cocaine, Hunter is hired by Burisma, which is a Ukrainian energy firm, and he's hired as counsel because he's a lawyer. but he's quickly placed on the board and is paid $1 million per year to be on the board of this energy firm. Doesn't have any background in energy. He has a background in law, of course, but doesn't have any background in energy, certainly not worldwide energy. And by the way, Joe Biden, as the vice president, is the Obama admin's point person on Ukraine, just coincidentally, following Russia's seizing of Crimea, because that was a big problem in 2013, when I think that happened. Yeah. And so Joe Biden is sort of the liaison, the czar, we would say it, even though that's not a real title that we give government people, but he was sort of the Ukraine czar. And at the same time, his son gets put on the board of a Ukrainian energy firm. Probably just a total coincidence. Has nothing to do with the last name, nothing to do with the $1 million per year that he's getting paid, probably nothing to do with the access to the guy that's in charge of Ukrainian sort of policy for the White House. Total coincidence, I'm sure. In 2015, via the Washington Post, Hunter arranges a dinner to benefit the World Food Program, which brings together some of his business partners, including Burisma executive, I'm not going to even try to pronounce this Ukrainian last name, along with his father. Some guests recall Joe Biden staying only briefly, but Archer says he stayed for the entire meal. This is Devin Archer, who is one of the associates, another guy on the board, and sort of a famous intermediary between the Biden family and these nationals, like Chinese and Ukrainian and Russian nationals that are funneling money through Hunter. Seems kind of strange, okay? So we know that Joe Biden is already lying because at the time he claims that he knows nothing about his son's business dealings. Nothing at all. That lie slowly comes unraveled because he's literally meeting with people via Hunter. And so it looks like pay to play. It looks like you are paying Hunter for access to the vice president of the United States. Unfortunately, this happens a lot in our politics. Look at the Clinton Foundation. That is a gigantic corruption machine that essentially says, oh, well, we can take foreign investments because, United States politicians cannot take foreign investments, but the Clinton Foundation can. It's a charity. So the Saudis could give millions of dollars, and then it's kind of hard for the Secretary of State Clinton to not go meet with them, even though it claims this is business, this is the government, and this other thing is charity. There's no way to not intermingle these things. This stuff is gross, okay? Okay, but this is about Hunter. I'm not going to get off on the Clintons. So 2017, this is a big year for Hunter because he doesn't file his taxes despite getting an extension. He divorces his wife and begins dating his dead brother's widow and subsequently gets her addicted to crack. So this is 2017 for him. 2018, he denies he's the father of a baby in Arkansas, but paternity test says he is. So he has to pay child support because remember, he's making millions of dollars. He's trying to not pay child support, trying to say this kid's not his. It is his. He ends up somehow convincing a judge to pay child support using his paintings. Oh, yes. By the way, now Hunter Biden has decided he's an artist. Art is a convenient way to get lots of money. These paintings were selling for millions of dollars, $500,000 a piece, things like that. Not because they were good paintings, but because the money went to Hunter Biden and it was an access thing. This is mostly from high Democratic donors. These are not art lovers. These are people that want to be close to, at the time, his dad was not the vice president, but it was, we were certainly looking like he was going to run for president in 2020. Okay. So he's technically not the vice president or the president at the time. However, Hunter is still trading on his name to be able to sell paintings instead of, not even sell painting. He's giving paintings to the mother to sell. So it's like, here's this painting that's basically worthless, except that it has my name attached to it. The only reason people are paying for those paintings is so that they can have access to me and my family. So if he gives one to the stripper who was the mother of his child in Arkansas, she probably can't sell it because people don't need access to her. They need access to the Bidens, right? So it doesn't really work. Anyway, it's crazy to me that a court allowed that. But in 2018, he also buys the gun. This is when that happens, when he lied on the background check about being a drug addict. The timeline of which, like I said, is all confirmed in his book. So it takes Joe till 2023 to claim the child as one of his grandchildren. So is that not an a-hole move, right? Who would not claim their grandchildren? I don't know. That's pretty a-hole to me. I don't like it. So 2019 to 2020, he's still filing his taxes late, but he's still paid nothing towards the now $1.2 million he owes in federal taxes. Remember, he is getting paid millions of dollars, some of which is through, like I said, this sort of pay for access scheme with his paintings. In 2020, we learned via the laptop and the New York Post story, this was when he left his laptop at a repair shop, and New York Post gets access to it, and we learn that Biden was lying when he said he knew nothing about Hunter's business dealings, because we have evidence of him meeting with people. And they claim that, and then it's like, oh, well, yeah, I shook some hands, I had a couple dinners, but we talked about the weather and stuff. The point is, people got access to Joe Biden when he was vice president and afterwards because of this Hunter situation. Okay, so kind of shady. And like I said, Joe Biden's always having to change the story about what he knew. I knew nothing. Well, I knew he did stuff, but I stayed out of it. We had meetings, but we only talked about the weather. Like the story changes all the time. And that's what the thing about a liar is. If you just tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. But if if the story changes over and over again and the goalposts get moved based on what kind of evidence comes out, that's a liar. So Joe Biden's a liar, just like Trump is a liar. We get 50 intelligence officials claiming the laptop is Russian disinformation, despite many of them and the FBI at the time knowing that the laptop was not Russian disinformation, that it was legitimate. And we wonder why people don't trust the government or experts these days. In 2021, a third party, Kevin Morris, who's a lawyer and a friend of Hunter's, lends or gives him the money to pay his back taxes. So again, do you know anyone? Do you have a friend that would pay your $1.2 million? It turns into $1.4 million, I think, with interest and penalties and stuff. Do you have a friend that would pay your $1.4 million tax bill unless your last name was Biden and your dad was the president? Do you think his name helped him or hurt him in this situation? He keeps falling upward. Everything comes up roses for Hunter Biden this entire time. He owes $1.4 million in taxes. He's blowing that money on cocaine and hookers and stuff, and cars and clothes and all sorts of things. Meanwhile, his friend's like, I'll pay your tax bill. Do you think anyone does that if your last name is not Hunter Biden? I don't think so. In 2023, as charges are being brought against Hunter, a plea deal was reached. This plea deal was super broad. It was basically as broad as this pardon was. It basically said not only these crimes, but it sort of blanket said all other crimes that happened between these time frames. And the judge goes, I don't think this is constitutional, actually, because I don't think I can approve a plea deal that is not for specific crimes, that doesn't lay out the crimes that the plea deal's for. And so she rejects it. And that blows up in the news. So this is kind of the first time. First of all, I think he gets the sweetheart plea deal because his dad's the president, and he can claim all he wants that the Justice Department is separate and that he's not interfering. But I don't believe for a second they're not considering our boss. This is our boss's son. There's no way that doesn't play in. It doesn't matter how independent you are. There's no way that doesn't play into the situation. Okay. This plea deal was a joke. I'm glad the judge rejected it. Biden, in his statement, is claiming the judge only rejected it because of pressures from Congress, as if this was some sort of scheme by Republicans. There's one right there. That's Joe Biden questioning the integrity of the judge. So this is how this works now. If we don't like something a judge says, we claim they're corrupt. We claim they're illegitimate. And when I say we, I mean the people in charge. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, they both do this. When they get something they don't like, they claim the legitimacy of that institution is no longer valid. So this is Joe Biden doing that. In his statement right now, he's basically claiming that congressional Republicans somehow influenced this judge to reject the plea deal. I think that's an attack on our institutions. So anyway, he ends up being, in 2024, he's convicted of the gun charge this past in June. He ends up pleading guilty to the tax charges. And by the way, these are federal cases, but the gun one was in Delaware. The tax charges were in California. That's just how these circuit courts work out. This indictment says that he earned $7 million between 2016 and 2019. Again, most of the time he's an addict. He's admittedly in his memoir just smoking crack all day long. So he's not actually doing anything for this money. It's because of his last name that he earned $7 million between 2016 and 2019, and an additional $1.2 million from a friend. That's, I assume, what we're talking about on the payback. Oh, of course, that happens later. So I actually think that's separate from the payback. Alleges, this is all in the indictment, by the way. It alleges that he spent millions on drugs, escorts, girlfriends, exotic cars, adult entertainment, high-end clothing, you name it. He also tried to claim personal expenses like his daughter's law school tuition as a business expense. So his $1.4 million that he owed, according to his accounting, was probably actually more than that because, like I said, he was being charged with lying, like writing off stuff that he couldn't write off. So, then we get the pardon after all this stuff. So Hunter's going to pay zero consequences for any of this wake of sort of madness that he left for the last 10 years. None of it. He's not going to pay. He's not going to go to jail. He's not going to pay a fine. He didn't have to pay the taxes. He got off paying child support by painting some paintings and giving them to the mother of his child in Arkansas. This is, I don't know. Does this not feel more like his last name helped him more than it hurt him? I think Chris Steiwalt said it really well here in this quote from a piece he just did. That's why it's important that public corruption is publicly punished, and stringently so. Hunter Biden made millions because of his father's decades in office, but argued through his lawyers that it would be wrong for him to face harsher penalties than other criminals because of his political prominence. He wanted to be someone special when he was hustling influence seekers at home and abroad, but when it came time to suffer the consequences, Hunter Biden wanted to be treated like anyone else. And when that didn't work, he got his dad to bail him out again. That's exactly what happened. That's what happened here. Biden is the liar and the a-hole here. Does this sound like someone who was unfairly treated or treated poorly because of his last name? Do you know any other crack addict, philanderers, who fell ass backwards into millions of dollars with no discernible work being performed? Do you believe he gets any of the jobs or friendly loans if his last name's not Biden? Congressional Republicans are hell-bent on finding the Biden crime family thread that connects to Joe, but I would argue it doesn't matter if Joe accepted a dime of Hunter's shady money for him to be corrupt, because we all think corruption and bribes are just material possessions. But I think it's pretty obvious that Joe was desperate to keep his son alive and happy. And that's what he got out of this shady stuff. His son had money. He was like, okay, even though he's enabling the addiction and stuff, I get that Joe Biden has endured more tragedy than any father or husband should have to, but he hasn't handled it super well. If you're not aware, his wife and 1-year-old daughter died in a car crash. This is when I think Hunter was 2 at the time or something. He's very young. So he's a widower with 2 young boys at the age of 30. But for example, he lies over and over through the years that the crash was caused by a drunk driver. It was not. His oldest son died of brain cancer then in 2015. So now he's buried a wife and 2 children, which, like I said, it's tragic anytime someone has to bury one kid. It's more tragic if you have to do that twice, and a wife, okay? But he also lies about that and claims that Bo died in war. He told the families of the 13 Marines who died in the Afghanistan withdrawal that, my son died. I understand my son died in war too. No, your son died of brain cancer 7 years after he was in Iraq. So, his last remaining son is a shady drug addict, but he enables that behavior. And like I said, it doesn't matter. People, like I said, think bribery and corruption is only material things. I don't think it is in this case, because Joe Biden was getting what he wanted. He wanted his son to be alive and I guess happy or whatever. And it was just whatever we can do to make sure he keeps, like I said, I think it was bad for Hunter too. I think he's enabling the behavior, but he plays along with the claiming of the grandchild. This is Hunter Biden sued the woman for the child to not have the last name Biden. These people are not good people. Then he lies to the American public over and over again that he's not going to pardon his son. He's not going to commute the sentence. He won't do it. And now we know from NBC News that he was considering it the entire time. The quote from NBC News says, the president has discussed pardoning his son with some of his closest aides, at least since Hunter Biden's conviction in June. This is from 2 people that had, I guess, direct knowledge of the discussions about the matter. And then they said it was decided at the time that he would publicly say he would not pardon his son, even though doing so remained on the table. So again, he's lying to you. He's lying to us. What is the difference between his lies and Trump's? Trump lies all the time. I'll call it out when he does. Why can Democrats and Biden supporters, which who knows why he still has supporters at this point. I mean, he's just absolutely demolished the Democratic Party over the last year. But like, he's lying to you. This is a cover-up for the corruption of his family, because it's not just Hunter, it's his brother too. And I think I expect to see more pardons. I think we will see more Biden family members broadly provided pardons, even though they haven't been charged with any crimes. And the excuse for that is that, well, Trump's Justice Department, Trump is going to corrupt the Justice Department and politicize the Justice Department, which, by the way, doesn't that sound just like what Trump has been saying this whole time about Biden's Justice Department, that it's been weaponized, it's been politicized? Biden's now saying the same thing about the Justice Department, even though his son was convicted under his Justice Department. This is under Trump's Justice Department. So I think we'll see more pardons from him. The House Oversight Committee identified more than 20 shell companies used by the Biden family that pulled in over $24 million from 2015 to 2019, often from foreign countries. $24 million going to a family who, like I said, I'm not saying you can't have your own things. Hunter is a lawyer. He went to school for it. But I don't know a lot of lawyers pulling down that much money. Unless, like I said, maybe the last name has something to do with it. Just to briefly hit on a few other of Biden's lies, because I do want to drive this point home, that he is not the nice Uncle Joe. And these are not like little political lies either. These are big lies that he's told throughout his life. This is not just because he's old and senile now, which, by the way, I mean, let's talk about that. He is still the president right now. I mean, that's hard for me to believe that for the next, 50-something days, he's still the president of the United States. I can't imagine what happens if something happens in the middle of the night and they got to wake this guy up. You, like me, may be too young, which is funny to say because I do not feel young. But in his 88 presidential campaign, during which I was 5, sort of went down in flames because he plagiarized his life story by borrowing details and exact words from British politician Neil Kinnock, RFK, JFK, and Hubert Humphrey. So he lied about his biography. He basically copied it from other politicians. I don't know why you would think you're going to get away with that, even in the 80s, before the internet. He claims he graduated from the top of his law school. He did not. He claims his house burned down with his wife in it. It was not. It was a small kitchen fire that was immediately put out. It was not a big deal. He says he grew up in a Puerto Rican community in Delaware. He did not. He says he drove an 18-wheeler. I mean, he tells these kind of stories all the time that have no basis in fact whatsoever. One big one that he claims over and over again throughout his presidency was that Trump left him with 9% inflation when he took office, but it was not. It was 1.4% when Trump left office, which is like pretty normal. We expect, 1% to 3% inflation per year. I mean, I think the Fed's goal right now is something like 2.5 or something as it cools down. 1.4 is nothing crazy. Now, Trump's spending eventually led to more of that inflation that happened, but he's lying about that. He claimed in the disastrous debate with Trump that sunk his entire second campaign, he claimed that I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world. I guess he forgot about those 13 Marines and others in the Middle East who have been attacked and killed while he was the president. That's a big lie. I could go on, but it would be really boring. And so you can find the link in the show notes. There's a few exhaustive lists. But this guy lies all the time, and he doesn't just lie all the time for his own ego. He does it in this situation. And I think this is his biggest lie, and I think it's his most damaging lie. Is that he said he'd be a return to normal, that he was the candidate that cared about and would protect our most important institutions. And that's why people voted for him in 2020, because they didn't like Trump. They didn't like the circus that the White House had become and the federal government. And they were saying no to Trump. But the reason they said yes to Biden is because he was the person in this Democratic field that said, like, look, I'm not going super far left like all the other people did. I mean, the Elizabeth Warrens, and look at every clip we just saw over the last 6 months, or not even 6 months, the last few months of Kamala Harris and everything she said in her campaign in 2019. It was left lunacy, right? It was stuff that just the vast majority of this country does not believe we need to do. And So people said yes to Joe because it was like, okay, there's the guy that's claiming he's going to be a return to normal and that he's the one that backs these institutions that we think are important. Because I think most American voters just want the government to work. I think they just want it to function, do the things it's supposed to do, stop trying to do everything. Just do the things you're supposed to do well, and then maybe take on a new thing. This seems to be what people are saying, because now we have, I think this is only the second time, certainly the first time since the 1800s, that we've had 3 one-term presidents in a row. Because you're going to have Trump, and then Biden, and then Trump, and obviously Trump can't run again. So we're definitely going to have 3 in a row. Maybe that trend continues, because I think people are just saying no to the party in power. That is not what we wanted. Let's try the other side. And then when they don't do what we want, we're going to try the other side. We're just going to keep ping-ponging back and forth. And so I think that by claiming to be a return to normal, and I'm going to be a normal Democrat, and then he goes all in on the left stuff, he attacks the very institutions that he claims he's protecting. I just think that he has not protected those institutions. So let's talk about the Department of Justice. I find it really hard to believe that he stayed out of the fray of, both the investigation of his son and Trump. I find that very hard to believe that there was no influence whatsoever, or at least any sort of tacit understanding of what he wanted out of it. I find that hard to believe. I'm not saying there's necessarily evidence. It just feels like it's got to be true, right? That he had some degree of influence. And I certainly think he would have had influence if, for example, I think the New York case against Trump, as I've said, was a sham. I think it's an absolutely terrible charge to bring upon Trump or anyone, because it had never been used before. It's clearly a political enemy kind of thing. If Biden thought that about that case, he could have shut that down. I know it's not a federal case, it's not the Department of Justice, but he could have said, hey, we're not doing this as a Democratic Party. But he didn't. He let it go on because he thought it'd be good for him. Now I think it galvanized people around Donald Trump because I think it looked weaponization kind of thing. So, but now he's claiming the exact same thing as Trump. Trump for forever has been claiming that these are politicized prosecutions of him. And like I said, I think there's some degree of fairness when it comes to the New York case. I do not think that's the case with the Department of Justice stuff. It's very clear with the documents case, specifically at Mar-a-Lago. Government gave him every chance to just give this stuff back. And he kept obstructing justice. He kept hiding the stuff. He had other people hide things for him. He kept lying about which ones he had. That case had to be brought. He was so blatantly breaking the law. And they gave him chance after chance. That's not weaponization. First of all, it's pretty convenient weaponization when he took the documents. If he wouldn't have taken the documents, they have no case to bring in the first place. Just do what you're supposed to do. And even if you find the documents or they claim, oh, you got the documents, we need those back, and then you don't give them or lie about it, again, you're just digging yourself into a hole. So that was Trump's claim this whole time. And now, Joe Biden has the exact same words in this statement. It's a politicized prosecution. He's claiming the same thing as Trump. He's the same. And we're supposed to believe that Justice Department that he was in charge of for the past 4 years was totally fair to Trump, but unfair to his son. Does that make any sense to anyone? It doesn't to me. In that statement, he continued, he went on, he said, our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America. Sorry, that's not in the statement. That's what he said after Trump's New York conviction in the Stormy Daniels trial. But now, it's the cornerstone of America. But now, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. There has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. First of all, I'd like to ask, who is they? Again, this is sort of a conspiratorial, us versus them, deep state kind of feeling. This is the same language Trump and his supporters use. Because who is they? It's not congressional Republicans who charged Hunter. It was his Justice Department. This is the group of people he's in charge of. So now we have both sides claiming that the Justice Department is corrupt and politically motivated. It's convenient that, they're both over the exact same period of time, too. It's the same Justice Department. It's not like, oh, this new group of people that Trump hired and this group of people that Biden hired. It's the same people over the same period of time. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. Yeah, Biden's claiming, nope, totally fair to Trump, unfair to my son. Trump's claiming it was totally unfair to me, totally fair to Hunter Biden. Something's obviously not right there. Biden continued in that statement, "For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I've wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process and led to a miscarriage of justice." Sounds just like Trump. Sounds just like him. And it's all BS too. All of it, because he's lying. Because nothing about this case was different when he was telling us he wouldn't pardon Hunter. Nothing. Back in June, we knew these gun charges. I said back in the spring, these gun charges, I think, are unfair. I don't think the tax ones were, but I thought the gun ones were unfair. So if the gun ones were unfair then and now, I mean, it's this, we felt the same. I felt the same way, and I'm not Joe Biden. Surely Joe Biden felt the same way. Why not just call that out and say, I don't think these gun charges are legitimate. I will look at a pardon if I think it's necessary. I mean, I get that he has to lie, but because he's running for president, but he's lying. Nothing about this case was different today or this week when he issued the pardon versus last June and for the last year when he's been denying that he wouldn't pardon Hunter. And as mentioned, I think the gun charges were unfair, okay? I've said that the whole time. But here's the two bad Democratic excuses that I'm seeing for Joe's pardon. The first one is that it's all about this over-prosecution, that no one would bring these gun charges, okay? Because, I think this has more to them doing. The over-prosecution, I think, came because they were embarrassed about giving Hunter the sweet plea deal, and that hit the news, and they couldn't hide from it. They kind of had to go like, we can't look like we're going hard after Trump and not after Biden. We have to look fair on both, and Hunter gets caught up in that net because he is the Biden that is currently being prosecuted by the DOJ, and obviously Donald Trump is the Republican and the Trump. So, they kind of had to go over prosecution, I think. I'm not saying that justifies it, but I can see why they did it. But if, let's say, so the Democrats are claiming, okay, this is an over prosecution. Okay, let's say that's the case. It's an over prosecution. Why would you not just commute his sentence? By the way, that he has not even been given yet. That's what you would do. You would not pardon him for any and all crimes, giving him clemency for anything that he did for 10 years. No, you would just say, I don't think the gun charges are fair, so I'm going to commute a sentence. That's what you would do, because the president has that ability too. He can just commute a sentence, he can pardon, he can do any of those things. No, because this is about more than that. He gave Hunter a pardon for those crimes and all other crimes committed over that course of a decade. If this is about protecting his son from future Trump politicized prosecutions, which I think is also a fair fear. I mean, to be fair to Trump, he ran on locking Hillary Clinton up in 2016 and never did anything about it once he became president. I don't really buy that the Trump Justice Department, Hunter Biden, I don't think is at the top of the list of people that they're going to go after. Like, what would be the point of that? He's not a real political enemy. He's maybe your political enemy's son, but Joe Biden's not running for president again. He's old. He's done. His own party kind of hates him at this point, even though they can't say it out loud for the most part. So I don't really buy that Trump would go after Hunter Biden, but let's just say that that's true. Let's say it's true, and that's a real fear of Joe Biden. If it was really about protecting his son from future Trump politicized prosecutions, why erase the tax and gun charges? Because those weren't Trump. Those weren't political. Those were your Justice Department, Joe Biden. So it can't be both of these things at the same time, because you don't need to pardon everything unless this is just about him getting his son off of the consequences for his actions. I am sure that Joe Biden is scared that a future Trump weaponization of the Justice Department, is going to be bad. But his pardon and his excuse for doing so are exactly what is so broken about politics now. Both sides don't wait for the other to do something bad. They just preemptively do something bad themselves and then use the other side's potential to do something bad as an excuse for doing so. So Joe Biden says, because Trump might do something bad in the future with the Justice Department, I've got to pardon my son for any and all crimes that he committed over the course of a decade. Because Trump might do something bad, I'm going to do something bad right now to preempt that. And when both sides continue to do this, what this is just giving permission all the time to escalate how bad of behavior we tolerate from our side. And we keep making excuses when it's on our side, sort of for fear that the other guys are going to do something worse, which just gives permission to the other side to do something worse. Democrats and Republicans are both using populist rhetoric to attack these institutions that they claim to care about, but the second they're not in charge of them, or do something they don't like, it's no longer, well, I disagree with the decision. It's the Supreme Court is illegitimate. And Biden has said that. And so we should pack it. That was his idea too. That is just as much of an attack on our institutions as anything Trump's done. Or you'll hear like, in Biden's statement, raw politics has infected this process. So I can pardon my son for any and all crimes that he definitely committed for the past 10 years because politics has infected. Just like, think about this language we're using. It's infected the process, okay? So he claims to be, in the exact same statement that he says that he's a defender of the Justice Department and stayed out of it. But they were the bad guys. This is going to give Trump full permission to do the same thing. This is going to let him pardon the January Sixers. Is that what we're calling them? I don't know. And maybe it was the plan all along. But it's going to give him the ammunition to be able to say, well, Joe Biden did bad things, and so I'm going to do bad things to prevent Democrats from doing future bad things. And this just goes back and forth and back and forth. But what could Democrats possibly attack Donald Trump for if he does this same thing? Let's say he pardons one of his kids for a similar thing. Do you think the outrage will be the same? Do you think that it will be a little harder for Democrats in the media to say, how dare you, when their guy did it first? I mean, how are they possibly going to attack him for that? I think both would be wrong, to be clear. It's just that it makes it really hard when neither side will call out their own side for doing the bad behavior, only the other side. Democrats have been complaining that Trump is going to use the presidency to avoid legal consequences for his actions. That was basically what we heard this whole year, was that he's running for president to avoid going to jail. They're already speculating that he's going to give pardons to January 6th, like I mentioned, and to people in his administration who he asked to do illegal things, to basically say, I'm going to ask you to do something. It might be illegal, but I'll pardon you for it. That's a fair prediction, I think. That's a totally fair prediction, because he's got to figure out a way to not do it the same way he did in the first term, where people just told him no and resigned. And I think he's trying to stack it with people that won't tell him no. And, people don't want to go to jail, even for Donald Trump. I mean, he's got some very loyal followers, but I think most of them don't want to go to jail. But if he promises to pardon them, well, no problem. And keep in mind, Trump's not going to run again, so he can do this stuff right out the gate if he wants to. He doesn't have to wait for that last month that the presidents normally do it. And by the way, there will be more pardons from Biden too. Like I said, this is not going to be the last outrageous pardon from Biden. I'm confident of it. I don't make a lot of political predictions, but that is one I'm happy to make. As Americans entrench deeper into these tribal sides that we're on, where we can never admit the wrongs of our own side, which is something I'm definitely trying not to do. I don't want to be that. And to be clear, just to clear the air, it's not that I don't love the term never Trumper, because I think it's kind of it's a misnomer in the sense that Trump's going to be the president, and I'm not going to be one of these people. I think the not my president stuff is ridiculous. It's stupid. It doesn't mean anything. That person is your president. It doesn't matter if you voted for them or not. They are going to be the president of the White. They're going to be in the White House. They're going to be in charge of the executive branch. They're in charge of a third of the federal government, whether you like them or not. So he is my president. But I'm going to call him out on the things that he does wrong, and I'm going to give him credit for the things he does right. And I did the same with Joe Biden, because I think that's what we're just supposed to do as voters. And I'm not going to put on these partisan goggles that say, well, because Trump has an R next to his name, I've got to defend everything he ever does. And yes, I probably call Trump out and my side more, because I think it's healthier when we have these arguments within the party or within our side. I don't think the bomb throwing from left to right and right to left works very well. It's getting worse and worse all the time. And I just think, for the example I use all the time is that if I need to prove a point to someone and they're conservative, I know I can't send them a New York Times article. I know I can't send them something from NBC News or something. I know if I want to prove that to someone, that they're wrong about something or show them something in the news, I've got to send them a link from Fox News. And I've got to do the same thing with my friends on the left. I've got to, they don't trust something from Fox News or, someone like that, or National Review or the Dispatch. I mean, I think the Dispatch is pretty fair, but, so I got to send them something from a left-leaning place for them to believe it. That's not great for the country. And I don't want to participate in that. So, but the truth is, we are getting deeper and deeper into these tribal sides. I'm making the show for people that don't want to dig deeper into those tribal sides. Okay. But as we dig deeper like that, we're just not admitting the wrongs of our own teams. And so I want to do that. I want to say the things that are wrong about the Republican Party, the things I disagree with. And you might hear more of that on this show. It's not because I hate Republicans more than I hate Democrats. That's not the situation. I disagree far more with Democrats than I do Republicans. Just because, I cannot find almost anything in the Democratic platform currently that I would get on board with. There's almost absolutely nothing. There's at least stuff in the Republican Party. I don't like the populist movement. I don't like the sort of, hey, we like big government as long as we're in charge of it. Don't like that stuff. I don't like the fiscal responsibility. We'll talk about all that stuff later. The point is, I'm going to call it out more on the right because I'm on the right. But this stuff is just desensitizing us to corruption. It's like, as Democrats make excuse for Joe Biden for this pardon, and Republicans make excuses for Trump for his bad behavior. And by the way, the comparisons to Trump had some shady pardons. Almost everyone he pardoned had already served their time. So for example, the one that gets brought up all the time, it's worth just touching on for one moment, is Donald Trump pardoned Jared Kushner, his son-in-law's father, and is now appointing him to be the ambassador to France, by the way. Jared Kushner's dad did some really shady stuff. We could get into, just because it's mind-boggling shady. He hired a prostitute to seduce his brother-in-law so that he could film it and then bribe him to, blackmail him to not testify against him in his trial for some other tax evasion and some other stuff. Can you imagine doing that to your own sister? Honeypotting her husband so that you could blackmail him? It's pretty shady. But he had served his time, and he was pardoned by Trump. It's a shady pardon. It's a familiar one. Clinton did a similar thing with Roger Clinton. But most of them had already been convicted, and the pardons were wiping that away, but they had served the time that they were sentenced to. So I think there is a difference there. It's very, to me, it really bothers me that Hunter just zero consequences for his actions. Zero. And like I said, Biden gives him this sweeping pardon where he can't, like I said, he could have carried out a terrorist attack in those 10 years and we can't charge him for it. I think this is just desensitizing us to this corruption. And worse, this is the worst part. I think Americans are embracing these abuses as long as their side is the one doing the abusing. They're cheering it on. Donald Trump is nominating people who are cheering on going after political enemies. They're saying, that's what I want to do, is I want to go after political enemies in politics, in media, in business. I think the business thing has kind of gone under the radar. It's bad. So how do we fix this? We gave the pardon power to the president because we thought the checks of American voters and Congress would work to keep them from abusing those powers. But Trump's reelection proves that American voters no longer care about classical liberal norms. He attempted to steal an election and sent a mob to destroy the Capitol. Congress refused to punish him for doing so, and so did voters by reelecting him. So why should we think that Democrats will behave any differently? They're kind of suckers if they keep pretending that they're defenders of these institutions, because every defense of Biden's pardon is still going to start with "but Trump" instead of just calling them both corrupt. And you even see people Democrats are embracing this. They're saying, well, yeah, that's what I would have done too. That's what he should have done because Trump, blah, 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 blah. And he's going to go out and it's always this Trump excuse. It's always like, bad behavior is okay as long as the bad behavior is used to stop Trump from doing something. Trump is this I think Democrats love Trump for this reason. They get to make any excuse to do any bad behavior ever. They've done it over and over and over again, and it's corrupting. Personally, I would get rid of the pardon power because I think it's clearly outlasted its usefulness. There's really no longer any reasonable checks on the power. No one as long as you can't get your own party to go along with, impeach. I think if I were in Congress and a Democrat, I know this is a far-fetched thing, I would vote to impeach Biden right now for this thing. I know it's within his rights as the president, but to me, it's such a line in the sand. I think it's impeachable. By the way, everything is impeachable. It doesn't have to be a crime to be impeachable. So I would get rid of the pardon power, but I don't see that happening. I don't see the Constitution getting changed in a Congress that, first of all, is Republican and Trump's about to be in power. Do you think they would take away a power from Trump? I don't think they would. And I don't think Democrats would do it because they won't admit that Biden, what he did was wrong. So I mean, this bothers me. Like, for now, this is just not going to happen. And this isn't really about just the pardon. The pardon is just a symptom of all the other things. And it's just, to me, it's just the cap on that. Like, yeah, Biden wasn't serious about protecting institutions. He wasn't serious about, because like I said, he's attacked the Supreme Court. He's attacked the judge that denied the plea deal. He's attacked the Department of Justice as being politically motivated in these prosecutions. He's attacked Congress, of course. He's attacked. I mean, what institution has he not attacked? I don't know. It just, to me, this is not just about the pardon. It's about, to reference Nick Cottagio again from his Boiling Frogs newsletter, it's Americans cheering on the sentiment of, for my friends, everything, for my enemies, the law. And that's what this turns into. It's who's in power and, for my friends, everything, for my enemies, the law. That sounds a lot like what Joe Biden just did for Hunter. You get everything because of your last name and your connections to me. But if you're my enemy, if you're Donald Trump, you get the law. You get the full brunt of the Justice Department. Anyway, thank you for spending some time with me on this episode of The Homeless Conservative. If you can do one thing for me, you could rate the podcast. And if you can do two things for me, share something of mine on Instagram or YouTube with someone you think might benefit from a different kind of political content. Thank you again for joining me. I will catch you next time on a Thursday.